Danny, I want to talk about Russia-Ukraine because this is a conflict that continues to escalate. It continues to be prolonged. And I think we're now really staring at the reality that there is nothing more left than the probability of a Russian victory, either sometime this year or maybe early 25. I mean, you are a military strategist. You've obviously served in the U.S. military for many years, won 2 Bronze Stars. You have an incredible experience and insight. So as of today, what is your assessment of what's going on in Ukraine?
Look, this situation here is egregious for me to watch unfold. I fought in an armored warfare in Desert Storm in a big tank battle, was in an armored cav regiment that actually actively patrolled the east-west border during the Cold War, where we had to study Soviet tactics and always be ready for large-scale operations. I was the second in command of an armored cav squadron for the U.S. 1st Armored Division in the mid-2000s, and we trained our troops, and what I understand very, very intimately what it takes to build a cohesive unit, what it takes to survive and succeed in combat. I understand, the Russian doctrine. I understand how they fight. I know that territory very well. It's very similar in that part of Europe as it was in Germany. And I can just tell you there is absolutely zero chance that Ukraine will ever succeed in its war. I have been saying that really since the outset because there's very fundamental reasons why. Now then, what I'm saying is, I don't see any chance that Ukraine can avoid defeat. If before there might have been a chance to where they could have, kind of had a stalemate or made it so expensive on Russia that they would have a negotiated settlement that was at least partially on Kiev's positions and would be beneficial to them. Now then, that's almost gone. And now then, the situation right now in early May of 2024 is Ukraine's choice, in my estimation, is either seek a negotiated settlement on the best terms you can get, which won't be that good right now, or keep with the fiction that you're going to try and win, which Zelensky still claims that that's his objective, and you're likely to suffer an actual military defeat. And I agree with you. I believe that as of, maybe even before the end of the summer, you could have a major break of the Ukrainian army. There's very specific reasons I say this. And once there's a major break somewhere, the whole army doesn't have to collapse. But if you get a collapse in one part of the formation and Russia exploits that and rolls in with strategic reserves that can exploit the breakthrough, then you could have the cascading collapse of the entire army here. That's what's at stake.
Yeah, Danny, I think there's some interesting data that's coming out of Ukraine. I mean, even Zelensky last month had admitted that they are outnumbered 10-1 as far as artillery. So the Russians have a 10-1 advantage in that. That's obviously why we saw this $61 billion aid package passed by the U.S. government. But tell us a little bit more, because I don't think that's the main issue. I mean, obviously they're down 10-1 as far as artillery, but it's actually manpower that's actually Ukraine's weakest link right now. Is that correct?
That is correct. It has always been about men, not machines, not money. You can't fight a war without money, without machines. You got to have those, but you can do various things based on if you have the personnel. Ukraine doesn't have the personnel, and it's never been a fair fight. Ukraine performed heroically, spectacularly, especially in the first year of the war, way above anybody's expectations, above my expectations. But here's the problem with those. That gave false hope that they could win, because even that bad performance by Russia in the beginning and the exceptional performance by Ukraine in the first year, it doesn't change demographics. It doesn't change the population. Russia has millions more men of military age from which to draw. And for Russia, this is an existential fight. I've heard many people try to say, oh, well, the North Vietnamese eventually outlasted the United States. Even though they didn't win on the battlefield, they eventually outlasted the United States. The Taliban outlasted the United States. Obviously, a huge disparity. So too can the Ukrainians. Here's where that falls apart. In both of those cases, the American army was fighting a war halfway around the world that nobody in the country thought was needed to fight. Everybody thought it was silly. That's not the case for Russia. It's next door. It's on the front porch, not the backyard even. And it is viewed by them as an existential battle because they believe it's the West and 50 nations of NATO and several others that are all allied against them. So they will fight this to the bitter end. And so their morale is plenty high. The population is supporting the war. This is not going to be like Vietnam or Afghanistan. Russia will keep fighting until they finally grind down Ukraine into nothing. And the numbers just don't bear up Ukraine surviving.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight. I didn't actually think about that because when we look at the Vietnam War, it's obviously, we had to withdraw because of the public opinion in the United States, right? I mean, there's so many people that were against that war, seeing innocent American lives being lost for what reason. And ultimately, that's why we withdrew. You make the same case for the Taliban and Afghanistan, and why the U.S. withdrew as well. This just was a lost cause. But I think what's interesting is a lot of people don't respect Russia's opinion here that this is an existential threat. But I mean, Russia's a sovereign country, and what they deem to be existential is their opinion, and that's exactly what it is. And I think that's an important thing for people to note. Like you said, the actual Russian people are very united in this. They're very frustrated, and I think there's a lot of support actually to this conflict, wanting to see this end. This is really interesting, Danny. But let's go on to the next point, which is talking about this $61 billion aid package. Tell us a little bit more about what the U.S. Congress has just passed and how that's going to work.
Yeah, I've got a couple of problems with this. Number one is that I have been seeing politicians for months say that, the reason why Ukraine is losing on the battlefield is because the U.S. Congress is delaying passing this bill. And they're saying, that's going to make all the difference in the world. And because they don't have ammunition and weapons, especially artillery, as you pointed out, that's why they've been backing off. And everything hinges on the U.S. passing this budget. Here's what no one paid attention to. The Czech Republic has been doing this operation here for many months now, to where they say they're going to get over 1 million artillery shells, scouring the world to try to get them and to feed them into Ukraine. And they've been succeeding. I think it's several 100,000 that they produced so far. I want to say 350,000 more are coming. So if you're already getting 350,000, I think within this year, I think it's just been this calendar year, and that's not changing the ratio that you talked about there, the 1 to 10. Why does anybody think that something from the United States is going to do something materially different? It's not going to. So my first problem is this budget does not do what people think it's going to do. You had the Secretary of State, Lloyd Austin, who bragged upon the publication of this once it finally passed the House. And he said, hey, 50 billion of this is actually going to America and to our jobs. I think 18 billion or something is going to U.S. operations, military operations in Europe, our operations. Another 12, 13 billion is going to replenish what we have already sent, for our own stocks. Only 13.8 billion was said it's going to go directly to Ukraine. The first billion that went, there was this big long list published by the State Department. They didn't give any numbers for anything, but there was a bunch of categories of stuff. Well, that tells you there's not many of any one of these categories. So it's going to be a paltry amount of all the things that they need, and it's not going to change the ratio, the dynamics, and it's not going to do anything to solve the manpower problem. And that's where the biggest problem lies right now.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I don't think a lot of people understand that. I was actually listening to a clip from John Mearsheimer, your good friend that you've also had a debate on. We're going to get into that discussion in a little bit. But he had said I think it's 28 out of the 61. So almost, certainly a very large portion of that is just going to be allocated to replenishing the weapons in the United States. So, that money actually is just going to be going to the military industrial complex in the U.S., funding our weapon manufacturers to replenish our own stock. It's not going to Ukraine. It's going right back to America. And interesting enough as well, I mean, obviously there was a long delay. I think the last aid package that was passed was December 2022, so it's almost a 16-month gap. And this one might be the last one, because I don't think that if Donald Trump wins the presidency, I don't believe that he's going to pass another aid package. Certainly if the Republicans take control of the Senate again. And even if Biden were to win a second term, I don't think American opinion is really going to support sending more money to Ukraine. I mean, is this something we want to be doing on an annual basis? Do we want to be sending $60 billion a year?
Here's the compounding problem with that. Yeah. Even the people that have passed this said this is going to help them. Biden said this is going to help them hold the line through the end of the year. Well, that necessarily means that they're going to need another one later this year. We're talking months away. They're going to be asking for another one. Zelensky on the 28th of April said he's looking for a 10-year commitment from the United States. Jeez. And I, like you, Cyrus, I don't see it. I don't see the American people or Congress signing up for literally a forever war to keep that thing going on.
Yeah, it's really tough because I think when you look at, again, I like to always quote John Mearsheimer because I think he's one of the most brilliant voices on this. I always refer back to a YouTube video that he made. It was a speech that he had given back in 2015 where he predicted exactly what was going to happen,
Yeah.
right? He said, if
I've cited
we
that
go,
on our show before. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
oh,
about.
it's amazing, but it was just so well said because it's very clear. If we push Ukraine down this road, we are going to be in a situation where Ukraine will get wrecked. And again, once again, the United States is involved in another forever war, which that's just seems to be our MO right now. We just cannot get out of these forever wars. We're constantly involved in so many things, but yet our own country, and their own citizens are not reaping the benefits of having a government that has money to spend. It's frustrating. I cannot see the American